exploration concepts, instrumentation monitoring of small bodies, and volatiles in the solar system. So the first one is going to be given by Julie Castillo-Rosé, and she will be talking about the status update on the Near-Earth Asteroid Scout CubeSat mission. Okay. Thank you, Julie.
Hi, good afternoon, and I wanted to thank the organizers, first because it's a very nice forum, it's very enjoyable, and also thank you for giving me a plenary talk. So I reported on the NEA Scout mission about 2 conferences ago, where we were just getting funded, and now we are at the point where we are about to pass our critical design review in 3 weeks. And in order to deliver and be ready to launch in about, in 2018. So I use this to, so I should add that this mission involves a number of NASA centers, about most of them. So there is a JPL, Marshall Space Flight Center is managing the mission and leading the systems engineering, as well as the development of the solar sail. And I am a science PI, and Les Johnson is the technology PI for the solar sail. And we also work with LARC, GSC, Paul is on the science team, with University of Arizona, APL, so Andy Rifkin is also on the science team, and the Goddard Space Flight Center. So just a summary of how we got there. In 2013, the Advanced Exploration Systems selected 3 payloads to fly on the Explorer Mission 1, which is the first full demonstration of the SLS, and that's supposed to take place in 2018 now. And these missions are supposed to be science-driven, even though they are project-led, so it's not a PI-led mission, but a project-led mission. And now they are all in phase C. These missions, they were all selected based on a few criteria. And first, there was a relevance to retiring strategic knowledge gaps for human exploration. There was a question of life cycle cost. Can we develop the mission in just a few years and within the cost constraints of the AES program? The idea was to also see how we could leverage new technologies for CubeSats in development and exploit commonalities between these various missions in order to reduce cost. And so these missions are the BioSentinel missions that Victoria mentioned this morning, which is about tracking the effect of radiations on small plants in lunar orbit. The Lunar Flashlight mission, which is led by JPL in collaboration with Marshall, which is about shining light on the lunar poles and with a spectrometer look for volatiles. And then there is a near-Earth asteroid mission that I'm going to focus on now. So the goal of the NEA Scout is to characterize NEA. It's only based on imaging because we have such a small spacecraft, a 6U spacecraft. But more generally, the goal is to demonstrate low-cost reconnaissance at NEAs in order to enable, to pave the way forward, if you want, for future missions meant for ISRU or strategic knowledge gaps. This mission leverages a number of previous technological developments. One is the solar sail that was deployed with the NanoSail D mission, and more recently the Planetary Society also demonstrated deployment of a solar sail in low Earth orbit, with the limitation that these sails are very small. We are talking about 10 square meter sails, while our sail is about 100 square meter sail. And what we discovered is that solar sails are not easily scalable, which is very problematic. We are also leveraging a number of developments that have been funded by NASA and in partnership with JPL, which are a new radio in particular, and a new computer and so on, which we are going to demonstrate in the near future. And we try to leverage commonalities as much as possible with the other missions that are currently funded to fly on EM1. So specifically, NEA Scout is going to image about 80% of the surface of an asteroid that is about up to 15 meters in size, at low resolution of 50 centimeters per pixel. And at closest approach, we can get about 30% of the surface imaged at better than 10 centimeters per pixel. We have a number, so that's our science, big science requirements. We also have a requirements from the technical side. We have to fly a solar sail. So we have to, in order to get to the asteroid, we need about a 90 square meter sail. And we also have a very strong telecom limitation. We need to encounter the asteroid as less than 1 AU from Earth. And at that point, the downlink rate is only 1 kilobit per second, to give you an idea of the challenge. But some things that are required from a science standpoint are really required the navigation team and the mission design team to make sure that we fly by the target at very low speed. So the relative velocity will be between 5 and 15 meters per second. So that's just to give you an idea of the products that we are expecting from this mission. When we are going to be able to see and image the target from about 50,000 kilometers away. And its position is not well known. So we are going to go through a phase of detection. And our camera needs to be capable of seeing the target from that distance, which is really a challenge because our aperture is only 18 millimeters. And then we have about a couple of weeks before arriving at the target, we are going to perform color measurements. And then from about 100 kilometers distance, we are going to be able to start resolving the target, and we are going to get the 50 centimeter per pixel resolution. And then we are going to fly by about 1 kilometer away from the target and get about 10 centimeter per pixel resolution. And I have an idea of the Regolith structure, for example. So something that we realized is that even in the database of all NEAs, there are a lot of them. Actually, there are very few that we can reach. So in this, so this shows the eccentricity and the semi-major axis of all the targets that have been identified so far. And our pool of targets is very small. It's extremely small. We have about 10 targets that are reachable without with our propulsion system. But in practice, the position of these targets are not known. So there are only, at any given time, there is only one target that is accessible to us, depending on our launch window. And there are a few launch windows for which we don't have any target, and that is really problematic. So we've been working with the NEO program office, hoping that every year there are about 5 to 10 new targets that are found, and we were hoping that we would be able to get more targets, and this has not happened. So we are stuck with only one target available as a function of time. So I want to really emphasize this because part of my job, I work a lot on CubeSats and I advise on CubeSat missions, and I was part of that NRC study on achieving science with CubeSats. And we see a lot of concepts about going to NEAs and do a lot of things. But in practice, this is extremely difficult to achieve with a 6U CubeSat. And that was, I think that's a big result, a big finding from the studies that we've undertaken for the past 3 years for this mission, is that it's very difficult to reach any NEO with such a small subsystem. So there are multiple reasons for that. First, it's just a question of how much delta V we can pack. And chemical propulsion is limited to a few 300 to 600 meters per second in a 6U. The solar sail has, in theory, it has infinite delta V, but in practice it's extremely slow. So it's hard to catch targets. But also there is a question of just not being able to see the targets with CubeSat camera. So if the position of the target is poorly constrained, then it's very difficult to recover, to detect with a 6U CubeSat. And then we have a question of data downlink constraints. We cannot do mosaicing of the entire sky to search for a target whose position is unknown, by hundreds of thousands of kilometers, which is the case for most of the targets in the NHATS database. So basically, in the end, we came to the conclusion that probably future CubeSat missions should assume at least 12U. But we have a target, at least one we lack. It's 1991 VG. It has a magnitude of about 28. It's between 5 to 17 meters. We don't know much about it, except that its position is unknown by 2,700 kilometers 1 sigma. This means that it fits in our camera field of view from about 50,000 kilometers away, when we assume 6 sigma position uncertainty. We don't know anything about its rotation period, does it have dust cloud and so on. We don't know that. We also have a backup target, which is 2013 BS45, which is has been observed from ground-based radar observations, and it's bigger. It's about 50 to 80 meters. No, sorry, 11 to 50 meters, sorry. But it's less frequently available to us. So, because 1991 VG is its position is poorly known right now, we think we can get it with our CubeSat, but there is a unique opportunity to observe it before we launch. So we are going to launch an observation campaign because 1991 VG will be available, accessible to telescopes between July 2017 and March 2018 next year. And Paul Ebol, Vishnu Reddy, and Andy Rifkin are going to lead that campaign to make sure we recover the target. There may be an opportunity to observe it from ground-based radar, which would be great, but the folks involved in that are not too sure, so we keep thinking about it. And we started coordinating with telescopes. So the community will be welcome to participate, and you stay tuned. There will be an announcement very soon. This is a description of the camera. We are very lucky to leverage ongoing investments into the Orbit Carbon Observatory, which decided at the last minute, like they're launching in December, but they decided at the last minute to include the context camera in their project. And so we are going to basically leverage all the non-recurring costs. And so the camera is being built now. It's a very good model because it offers 27-degree field of view, which we need in order to locate targets whose positions are poorly known. But it has also a very nice IFOV, which translates into 10 centimeter per pixel at about 0.8 kilometer closest approach distance. And its sensitivity is also very good because we can detect from 1,000 kilometers away, sorry. We are going to add color filters on part of the detector in order to turn that context camera into a multispectral imager. And so that we can do a bit of color typing and try to separate, S-type from more of a C-type characterization of our NEA. But the compositional characterization will be very not limited to basically color typing for this target. So that's just a description of what's going on when we get in proximity to the target. About between 100 and 10 kilometers away, we are going to perform geological imaging at low phase angle and resolutions of 50 centimeter per pixel to 1 meter per pixel. And then we are going to come very slowly at about 10 to 20 meters per second. And unfortunately, we don't have a very good phase angle at closest approach for Regolith imaging just because the solar sail puts constraint on our attitude. But we hope to get that class of imaging resolutions for the target. And the problem with the solar sail is that it has a certain pointing with respect to the sun, so we can slew at some point. I mean, something we never do with a solar sail is show I'm practically done. The dark side of the sail. Don't turn the sail because otherwise the spacecraft is going to roll around and you're going to lose the spacecraft. So the status is that the project is on track for the upcoming design review in August. We've already demonstrated solar sail deployment. We are also working right now on the science data archiving and data management plan. But there is no plan at this stage to expand the science team until we've demonstrated that we've deployed and we can function for an extended period of time. But I'm hoping to work with SMD and make sure that there could be a participating scientist program. And at this stage, I know 2 years ago I said, yeah, we could accommodate, stuff, and the radiation sensor, and you name it. But at this stage, we have absolutely no volume left, so there will be no science goals for this mission. And that's just a small scale, I think it's half scale, demonstration of the solar cell that was presented to Charlie Bolden back in February, if I remember well. And this is Stephanie Lockett, he's our sale lead, and Leslie McNutt is our project manager. And Jared Dervan is our lead system engineer at Marshall. So in summary, NEA-SCOUT will be the first demonstration of a mission that can retire strategic knowledge gaps at low cost. We are less than $20 million. And we are going to combine a number of capabilities like detection tracking and also close proximity science with a single instrument. And that should hopefully pave the way for future exploration of NEAs, launching a lot of these spacecraft. It's also the first opportunity to image an NEA that is smaller than 100 meters. So that's complementary to what we know about NEAs. And especially NEA-SCOUT will meet its target in the same time frame as OSIRIS-REx and Hayabusa 2. In terms of space technology, so we are going to introduce a number of technologies that future mission might want to leverage. One is an end-to-end demonstration of onboard image processing in order to deal with very resource-constrained capabilities, and especially when you have a very poor downlink capability like us, you might want to use onboard processing and data extraction. We are also on a different pot of money demonstrating autonomous navigation software that was flown on a Deep Space One. And we hope that, if successful, the project would fly it on NEA-SCOUT. We are going to introduce a new computer, which will be the most performant CubeSat computer available. And the camera, we are going to see if we can combine it with star tracking capability, which would make a very small instrument that has a lot of capability packed. And of course, we are a pathfinder for solar cells because it will be the first end-to-end demonstration of a solar cell for deep space navigation. And that's just a summary of all these capabilities, just to show you all the missions that are being developed right now for flight around the Earth. And these missions are introducing a lot of instruments. And then in deep space, where we are introducing a telecom capability computer, validating the Blue Canyon Star Tracker, and a reflectory with the Marco mission. And just to finish, I invite you to read this report in which I was involved. I was the planetary science lead for this report, and I think the team was really great and led by Thomas Zurbrunn. And we put a lot of thoughts about what is really realistic to plan for CubeSats and what is really too much out of the box. So I hope you will find it useful. Thank you.
We have time for one, maybe two questions.
So you said you have limited targets. If you went up to 12U, do you know how many more targets you would have?
So the thing that would be nice to do with if we kept the solar sail is to multiply the surface area of the sail by factor 2, for example. And if there is unused volume, just stick to the minimum payload. And by doing so, we would increase our ISP very, very much. And that would help. If we use chemical propulsion, we would be able to get up to 1 kilometer per second delta V. And yes, again, that would help a lot. There is a project that is called NEO 100 that is looking at what is the pool of target for various classes of CubeSats. And they think that they can really reach 100 CubeSats with a 100 asteroids, sorry, with a 24U CubeSat.
Sorry, I missed it if you said it, but what's the total delta V you expect just from the sale?
So it's infinite,
No, I mean over your mission time.
1.2 kilometers per second.
Yeah, just to comment on the comment, I can't help myself. The big issue with going beyond the moon for CubeSats is communication, and there's also thermal issues involved with some of the systems you have to carry on board. So that additional U, although the payload could be larger, could also support a much broader range of applications, certainly in the interstellar system.
You mentioned a deficiency of targets using the NHATS database as a starting point. It's my understanding that NHATS generates its targets and trajectories starting with several assumptions that are only implicit to a human trajectory. So transit time constraints and so forth. Would more trajectories and targets be available to you if you removed those constraints and looked beyond the NHATS database because this is not a crude vision?
So we used all the targets possible. We looked at the target pools. We used the Earth close satellites. So it was not just a NHATS pool.
The reason why we identify NHATS targets is that is relevant for human exploration for the strategic knowledge gaps. But we look at all targets.
Great, thank you.
Thanks again. Sorry.
Okay, our second overview talk for this afternoon will be given by Ariel Deutsch.